Hello. I know that we're not at ease right now. We have adjourned for the day, but this is Delegate Cia.
And Lashrecse.
And we just wanted to come talk to you because today is really important. As you know, today is called crossover, and that means that we have completed the work of the House. The House is done with our House bills, and the Senate is done with their Senate bills, and so now the bills cross over. So the House will be taking up the Senate bills, and the Senate will be taking up the House bills.
And in other words, if you have not had your bills passed by this deadline, they are essentially dead, and you will have to try again next year.
Right. But we just wanted to summarize some of the bills that have passed in the last 2 days. So we'll make sure that we put the link so that you can look back and see all of the bills that have passed the House and all of the bills that have passed the Senate. I tweeted that out earlier. But today we just want to talk about a lot of the bills that passed for the last 2 days.
And if we get too deep in the weeds on some of these bills, you can also, as always, go back and watch not just today, but also yesterday, the day before, which was another major day. There were so many bills. Here are these huge calendars that we have labeled and have been operating out of just because so many, not just historical, but critical bills to folks who are not just in our districts, but all over the Commonwealth. We have been looking at those, and so there's a link always online, one of the more transparent things we've been able to do. You can go back and watch both last night's session and today's session.
Right.
So let's jump into just some of them. So we tried to make a list, but literally when we think about all we have been able to do in the last 48 hours,
Crazy.
It's almost unfathomable because for many of us, we have been introducing these bills year after year after year.
Right.
And like, you think, oh my God, we just did that.
Exactly.
And in previous years, you would pass something and it would be a huge to-do because it was nearly impossible to accomplish it. And this year, it's just like, oh, one more good bill passed.
Right, and some of it is really landmark, and so we wanted to cover some of the larger topics and things that we personally have been working on, but also things that we've been supporting our colleagues in. We've heard from you about, and also feel free to ask us questions. We'll try, and we don't have any bill numbers in front of us. I'm gonna just be honest, but if you have a question, we can go back and get bill numbers, and then that way you can see the conversation in subcommittee, in committee, on the floor. So that you really know what it is that's going over to the Senate, and do the same thing so that you can help us give your input to us for the Senate bills that are coming over. A lot of them may be the same, but some of them are different. Some of my bills didn't have a Senate companion in the same way, so it's like, new conversations that get to happen.
And to be clear, the makeup of the bodies are very different. Sometimes you have issues that are between Democrats and Republicans, and sometimes you have issues that are between the House and the Senate just because the makeup is so different.
Or different regions. Like we had a conversation today where, about the minimum wage, where it was important to hear from Republican member Delegate O'Quinn because his experience out in Southwest is a needed voice in these conversations as we move forward. And, we bring more of an urban voice to the conversations, and that's what really makes this place special, hearing from all across the Commonwealth as we enact and really put forward this good legislation.
So let's jump into some of this. So for some of the voter bills, and I'll let Delegate Price talk a bit about redistricting, but some really good bills that just flew under the radar, extending polling hours from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. I can recall even as recent as the last election, trying to get people to show up before the polls close, or having people who were just arriving and still needed to rush inside before the polls close. And so if this passes the Senate, we will have 1 more hour to actually go and vote from 6 a.m.
And it does have a delayed enactment clause, so it's not for this election, but for 2021.
Same day voter registration, and also automatic voter
on the front end and the back end.
So can you imagine a conversation in Virginia where we're saying you will be automatically registered to vote, and you can also do same-day voter registration? When you talk about trying to allow maximum participation, I never thought we would arrive at this day.
And earlier in the session, we passed the no excuse absentee voting, so that would also be another tool that would help folks get to the polls. And so that has been our entire point. What can we do to remove the obstacles between the voter and the ballot? And I think that the House has done a great job putting those forward. And as Delegate Eric suggested, there were some redistricting bills that came out of the House today. So I'm a little bit speechless, not going to get emotional, but the fact that we passed out a criteria bill from this body that not only enshrines the language of the Voting Rights Amendment sections 2 and 5 as it pertains to redistricting, but also would effectively work to end prison gerrymandering so that racial, political, and prison gerrymandering are being addressed in the criteria no matter who is drawing the lines. I know that a lot of the conversation has been about the who and the commissions and things like that, but we have to pause and just talk about, I have put this bill up with advocates for the last 3 years and worked really hard. Even last year, this bill didn't even get a hearing. And now it passed out of this body, it's headed to the Senate, and the Senate version passed out of the Senate. So that's a good indication that that criteria will become law in Virginia. And then we also had the conversation about the commission and whether or not we'll go forward with the proposed constitutional amendment, but also House Bill 1256, the advisory commission that would allow for us to have a process legislatively for 2021 without committing to the flawed amendment and then passing another better amendment next year. That passed out of the House too. So I will just say, stay tuned.
And just to put a fine bow on it, I mean, literally, when you talk about redistricting, no matter where you are in the Commonwealth, even no matter what political party you are, this is something that matters a lot to so many people. Just trying to make sure that representatives aren't the ones drawing their own lines, and that the people who live in these communities actually feel heard and feel like they have a seat at the table is what we are trying to accomplish. And so the fight is on, and it's gone to play out in these next few days and weeks.
So if you are interested in House Bill 1256, I'm gonna do the shameless plug because this is my bill, this is my video with you. So House Bill 1256 is the bill for the advisory commission that would allow for us to do a better job crafting a proposed constitutional amendment to really make sure that we are getting it right before we put it into the Constitution. That's House Bill 1256. So call your senator and make sure your senator knows that you support that, and that would be super helpful. We also passed a bill that I've been working on since 2017, and that's to get rid of the infamous bowl. So if there is a tie in an instance of a recount, if we pass this out of the Senate, it has passed the House, we would not have the bowl. We would actually have a special election so that the power goes back to the people where it should be, rightfully. So
a few more.
We just gave you a shout out.
We did give you a shout out. Hawking in the background is Delegate O'Quinn. Shout out to Delegate O'Quinn in Southwest Virginia. But really quickly, since she did the shameless plug, I will say 2 bills that I'm also proud of, 2 ban the box bills. One that has to do with banning the box on employment applications, and then the other having to do with banning the box on public institution college applications. I mean, particularly for the higher ed, to think that in Virginia our institutions ask about anything from a criminal infraction all the way to a traffic ticket is a little shameful. The fact that we are taking that information into consideration when making our admissions decisions it's just not needed anymore. And so both of those are headed to the Senate.
Tell them about the percentage. What did you say?
45% of students.
Either one.
Well, 45% of students do not finish college applications when they see a criminal history question, a traffic infraction question listed on their admission application. And one of the points is we all know you need still a significant portion of jobs are requiring you to have a credential, a associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and to know that 45% of students are not completing, and or continuing education adults are not completing college applications because of that question, especially when we know there's a disparate impact of certain people when it comes to coming in contact with law enforcement. This is another way to just keep another barrier in place for so many people.
And then since other places have instituted ban the box, you gave a statistic on how many more people had gotten called back for jobs Wasn't it like 30%?
It's like 31% of individuals who have been positively impacted by ban-the-box policies. There has been a long-standing debate as to whether or not it actually accomplishes what it's intended to do. But when I say I have pored over the research, I have pored over the research.
It. She read it.
And so that is just unfounded, and it is a false statistic. And so it's still very important that we move these policies forward formally in Virginia to tear down barriers to not keep them standing in place. So
I want to talk about the next huge thing that we did today. And I will just be very, 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 very honest. It doesn't do enough for me, but we passed House Bill 395, which is increasing the minimum wage. And so the bill would increase minimum wage to $10 in July.
Yes.
Like in July. And it also includes removing exemptions, which means it includes domestic workers and folks that work for home health care in those areas. And so it's on a track to get to $15, and it's kind of, it's delayed to get to the full 15. But I think that this bill was within taking input from tipped workers, from business owners, and from workers. And so this is, it's cool for now, but it's still a historic step in being able to do that. So I just posted on Facebook. I had my speak light on, but I think the debate had gone on kind of long because we had a long calendar today. But basically giving a shout out to the home health care workers and domestic workers that are doing the work in order for some of us to be able to leave our homes. My grandmother just turned 101. And her home health care workers that take such great care of her allow for my dad to be able to go take care of his patients and help run the city, allow for me to be up here. So we really know that our family members are being taken care of in order for us to leave the home. And so it's foundational work to keeping our economy going. So shout out to y'all because y'all are in this bill. You're included in order to get that minimum wage.
And I just want to add that this could not come soon enough. I can recall just as a child, my mom, who was a home health care worker, not being around on Christmas, not being able to go to school events, not being able to do so much because of trying to work more hours just to get a livable income to provide for our family. And so this is how many years later that it's taken for us to get to a place where we are even having an open and honest conversation about the needs of people who are giving so much, sacrificing their own quality of life, sacrificing their own family's needs to provide to others. And so this is another one that we need you to contact your senators.
Absolutely.
Be just not in their faces about it, but just really be assertive, be assertive and letting them know just how many people how this might impact you and just so many Virginians. There was a huge debate on the floor here today about how it would impact rural communities and small businesses. And as someone who represents both, as both of us represent both, sometimes at some point you just have to lay the hammer down in saying what's really going to be good for all people and put the politics aside, and this is one of those things.
And trust and believe, even as we're uplifting some of these amazing pieces of legislation that are moving forward, we know that they're not perfect. We know that we're going to have to look at Medicaid reimbursement rates in order to keep up with being able to pay your workers these minimum wages, increased minimum wages. We understand that, we're going to have to make sure that folks that have jobs that also have assistance and subsidies for housing won't end up making too much to get their benefits, but not enough in order to afford rent. So we're weighing out all of that, but this is what was needed in order for us to make that first step. And we're also well aware that $15 an hour by 2025 is not going to be a livable wage. But if this is what could pass today, we'll keep it moving and just understand that you have our at least our word that we will continue to work on it so that it actually does get to a livable wage.
And I think it's just really important to underscore the point that we know that some of these bills, as she has said, have not left here perfect. But this relationship between you and us as the representatives, it's intrinsically linked. So we're going to do our part on our end to make sure that we get to a place where the policy is sound policy. Right. But there is absolutely a responsibility on your end to make sure that the folks who will be taking the votes on these bills, they know that you want to see better, that you want better, and you're going to hold them accountable if they don't do better.
And that's both parties.
And that's both parties. Both parties. So a few more. We're going to run through these because they are a lot and they are heavy. So another shameless plug, proud that we lifted the TANF family cap. We are one of the few states that still have this family cap in place, which basically said if you already had children and you're receiving TANF and you have another child, you're not eligible to have your child to be receiving resources for that. Absolutely insane. More discriminatory legislation here in Virginia that we are just going to move past, and hopefully it passes the Senate, which I don't see how it wouldn't.
Yeah, but that, don't forget that was put into place while they were trying to take away contraception, while they were trying to remove reproductive health care options. So it's like, so what are we talking about here? And so a lot of this is removing the obstacles for people to be able to take care of their families in the way that they wish to live, out with their families.
Monuments, war memorials, I mean, that conversation was just so deeply passionate, and you almost can't really even imagine what the debate is about, but there was a legit debate as to why we should not have passed that bill, but that's another one that's headed
and it's local option. It's local option, and we will post links for both Delegate Hudson and Delegate McQuinn's speeches on that, because I will tell you, I was trying to hold back some tears on that.
Absolutely. So also we passed in-state tuition for refugees and in-state tuition
for DACA. Yes. Dreamers.
Driver's licenses for all.
Yes.
Removing another barrier. The Virginia Clean Economy Act. Another one of those bills where we were able to get it to be a little bit better, but we still have some work to do there. Try to send it over to the Senate in a place where it has a higher possibility of passing.
Yeah.
Also, the landlord-tenant bill of rights that was carried by Delegate Ward.
So shout out to all of the residents in apartment complexes that have reached out to me. I won't name them, but you have reached out to me and you've been asking for more information about your rights and all of that. And there's several housing, just good housing bills that have passed this session, but we were just supposed to be talking about the ones from the last 2 days. So the Tenants Bill of Rights did pass, and so that lets you know about your ability to put your rent in escrow if people are messing with you and not fixing your stuff. We have a bill, SB 906, that's coming over that basically says that you can say why you didn't pay your rent because the stuff didn't get paid, as to evidence. If you're taken to court for not paying rent. So there's a lot of good housing bills coming out.
We lifted strip search on children.
Listen,
the fact that this is even a thing.
And with all due respect, we love a lot of folks over in the executive branch, but I just do not understand how we were strip searching kids. So we passed a bill that basically said you can't strip search kids. But the other thing that bill does says that if you are flagged and searched, whether it's through the dog or through the scans, and you have nothing on you, instead of being turned away, you are still granted a no-contact visit, so that your trip to see your loved one would not be for naught, even if there's a glitch in the screening process. So
there's another bill that went under the radar significantly, and this is Delegate Torian's bill that had to do with requiring law enforcement to now have the collection of data in place. They are now required to submit data for every traffic stop that they make, so that we now have something moving forward to gauge whether the law enforcement in Virginia is inadvertently maybe targeting specific populations of people. That bill, I don't have the bill number, but we'll post a link for
HB 1250.
There wasn't a whole lot of talk about it, but this is major. When you talk about trying to have the data to support that people of color are targeted specifically, especially in our communities, this will give us the first proof of whether or not this is happening and where it's happening.
And numerical proof, because anecdotally we know it's happening because we've heard from you. But this is the numerical proof that we need in order to direct better training, direct more resources, but really be able to make those cases.
And so the other big bill that you probably don't know this exists in is House Bill 1414. This is a huge transportation bill, but there's a lot tucked into that. So I just want to point out some of the safety changes that will come with this bill. So number one, not using your seatbelt will become a primary offense under this bill. You would be
So that means, remember, if you're speeding and they can pull you over and then you didn't have your seatbelt on, it was a secondary offense. This means you can be pulled over for not having your seatbelt on. And this would go into effect July 1st.
Number two, this transportation bill would also prohibit the use of your handheld device. So in the past, we have had individual bills that said you can no longer use your phone while driving, you can't text while driving. This is tucked into this bill. You cannot have any handheld device while you are driving, and that would be Go ahead.
No, I was just going to point that out.
And that will go into effect July 1, 2021.
So there's, excuse me, I'll take that back. For both of those, that is a delayed enactment clause, so that's next July 1.
Okay. Prohibiting open containers in the passenger area of vehicles. We all know what we're talking about here. This would also be a change in the law underneath this transportation bill. Okay. Speed enforcement in highway safety corridors. Now, there is another bill that is specific to school zones and specific to work areas. This would say highway safety corridors, which is a bit broader than those other bills that we passed earlier this session. And then lastly, allowing for lower speed limits in business and residence districts, which you would have to mime the signage in your area to be sure about whether you are in one of those zones or not. But there's...
Some of that is problematic, but I'm going to tell you why I voted yes. There's a lot of support and resources for the Hampton Roads area as it pertains to the traffic that we are experiencing, continuing expansion projects, and so sometimes you gotta compromise, and so it all came together. There was not an opportunity for line amendments on the speaker's bill, so I'm gonna let y'all know. So our yes vote, I think, was more on the majority of what was in the is it an omnibus bill? Yeah, an omnibus bill. So there is a lot of good in it, and again, that was House Bill 1414.
So we have just loaded you with so much.
Are we done?
No,
we're not done.
Yes, we are.
No, we're not.
Oh,
we're creating
fine.
a state exchange,
which is also a big deal.
Oh my gosh! So one of the things that I think both sides of the aisle can agree on is that we need to lower the cost of healthcare and prescriptions and all of that we have to pay out of pocket. And one of the ways of doing that is having a state exchange in addition to the federal exchange. And so we did pass a bill for that. And so looking forward to seeing how that comes out of the Senate or any conference bills. Because I think that's going to be a really, really good move toward getting us towards even more affordable and accessible healthcare, which I think both of those.
So,
and one more.
Also, we did pass a version as a first step towards legalization, decriminalization of marijuana. That bill was carried by the majority leader, and so we have heard an outpour of just contextual information from advocates, from constituents about what they would like to see occur with this bill moving forward. This is one of those bills where there is a companion bill in the Senate. So one bill is going to come out one way, that bill is going to come out another way, and ultimately from a procedure standpoint, the bills will go into conference and the final language will be negotiated and hashed out. But just to be able to have the conversation about what this needs to look like and the impact that it has on our communities is major. As we stated in the beginning, some of these things were dead on arrival in the past. And so this will be another one of those bills that we want to make sure that everyone is paying attention to so that we can make sure the final version comes out as the best policy that it can. Yeah,
and I would say two of the things that moved me to a yes, one of the bills that I wanted to support was no longer alive by the time it got to the floor, but also the argument that while not perfect, the bill is still better than status quo. And that is a major point when we have to look at what's a perfect bill that I would want. Okay, now would that get through the House and the Senate? If the answer is no, then you can throw up a no vote, just to send the message, or you can also work to continue to make the bills better. And so I think, with capping the fee, the fine at $25, with there being, sealing of records. And so there is a lot good in the bill. There isn't a few things that that I would want to see in it, but upon hearing that what I would want to see wouldn't pass either chamber, it kind of becomes then now let me vote on this piece of legislation that's in front of me, not what then becomes a wish list. And so I would just say that just means that we keep working, and it just means that this was our first time with a lot of these bills, as Delegate Aird said. So some of the things that she's carried for years, some of the things that I've carried for years, not only did they pass with bipartisan support. So all of the things that we just mentioned, to be clear, were the last 2 days. We didn't even go
I
over
was going to
everything.
say, there's so much that we haven't touched on. If you didn't hear us talk about your bill, that doesn't mean that it didn't pass or
Right.
that it wasn't acted upon. We just wanted to give you a little sneak peek of what we did in the last 24 hours and in terms of what you can expect moving forward. So before the week is out, like she has a bill up that's up tomorrow in the Senate. The process will not slow down. It will, in fact, speed up. And so my bills are going to be heard in the Senate as well. If you were following these bills in the House, follow them over to the Senate, still show up to speak at the subcommittee meeting,
Absolutely.
still show up to speak at the committee meeting, still reach out to your delegates to tell them to vote for specific bill positions. We are in the home stretch here, even though it doesn't feel like that. And so what you can expect moving forward is that we will continue on some of these big issues, but we need you to stay engaged with us in this last remaining
And they
weeks
do
of
things in the
session.
Senate a little bit different. So some of them don't even have subcommittees. It goes straight to full committee. So that's one step less than, when you're going through the House.
Especially if it was uncontested in the
Right.
House. So if you saw that bill just fly through and you think, oh, we'll get it in the Senate, you might want to double check because
could be up
sometimes
tomorrow.
they will just
Yeah.
move it right along.
And then the other thing is when we debate our bills on second reading, they debate their bills on third reading. So when you're tuning in to watching the session, third reading is when the Senate debates it and votes on it. And so it'll be, interesting to see what gets through. The other thing that's coming up is I think next Sunday is when the budget
This coming
budgets,
Sunday, yeah.
The budgets are coming through, and so remember, the governor puts out the introduced budget, then the House gets together, and we put up amendments to it. The Senate gets together, they put up amendments to it, and then we got to get all of that into one document. So I think that's actually one of the most important bills, House Bill 29 and House Bill 30. Those two budget bills are probably the two most important bills out of all the things, because some of this stuff passed, but if it's not in that, if it's not in the budget, it's
not going
a
anywhere.
philosophy, it's a theory as opposed to an actual implementation. So you got to keep your eye on that. I know on the 19th, I'll be having an online webinar about the budget.
With friends.
Yes. When it comes out, we're going to have, actually the Commonwealth Institute for Public Policy is going to be joining us as well. So I'll try and get some more of my friends together so that we can do that for y'all and just stay engaged. We are loving the fact that you all are engaged, because this is going to impact you, right?
And with that said, it's my anniversary,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm out.
And I'm going to go read. So I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.